Welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hey, Heartful Parent Podcast listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast and welcome back to a new school year. So whether your kids have been in school for a few weeks or even a month now, or you just started, I know this is a period of transition. And for many of us, it is a time of year that really serves as a reset, where we set new goals. And for me, I'll tell you, it's more meaningful in terms of that reset and the goal setting than New Year's ever is. I know a lot of people love New Year's resolutions. I don't love them. I do use New Year's to do another kind of reset and check in about where I am and what my plans or goals are for the year. But I often find that I am more successful or more engaged with shifts, resets, changes that I make in the fall. So if that's you, or even if it's not, this episode and next week's episode are for you. So let me explain. Today's guest is someone that I thoroughly enjoyed talking to and learning from, because what she has to share really is pretty far outside my wheelhouse. Now, she's going to talk about time management. You might be like, oh my God, what does time management have to do with parenting? Well, first of all, it has everything to do with parenting. And especially if you are also a professional, it has everything to do with how you manage those two things. And, if you are a partner, it has to do with how well you partner. And time management is one of those things that often people look at to restructure, to reset at these times of the year where we have those resets. So fall, right, the start of the school year here in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, and New Year's, for pretty much everyone. And so I think the timing of this interview is just perfect. Also, my guest today, Dearmon Kornick, is truly an expert in this space. So I first learned about and met Anna through a summit that we both spoke at, the Secrets of Supermom Summit for 2023, which is a fabulous summit hosted by Lori Oberbreckling. At that summit, Anna was talking about some of what we're going to dig into today and next week. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Anna, but I want to preface this by saying we went pretty deep on some of these things because I found it so incredibly helpful to my own life and my own parenting and my professional life, my partnering, and how I meld all of those things and manage them, that I decided to break this interview into 2 separate weeks. It was a lengthy interview, and to make it more manageable for your time, right? Since we're talking about time management, and also to give you time to kind of think about and digest some of these concepts that Anna talks about. We're going to start this week by talking about what I would call like the big picture and sort of a philosophy shift around time. And then next week, we're going to talk about sort of the nitty-gritty how to. So let me first tell you who Anna is. So as I said, she talks about time management. She is a time management coach. Yes, there is a such thing. She's also a wife. She's also a mom. And professionally, she helps busy parents and professionals, business owners, master time management so that they can stop feeling overwhelmed and start spending time on what truly matters most. She just wrote a book. It came out in June of 2023 called Time Management Essentials: The Tools You Need to Maximize Your Attention, Energy, and Productivity. Based on everything that Anna shared in this interview, I was so excited. I immediately went out and ordered a copy, and I am now anxiously awaiting for it to arrive. Anna is also the host of a podcast. So if you're looking for another podcast to add to your list, she's the host of the podcast called It's About Time. It's a podcast about work, life, and balance. There's some overlap in what what she and I talk about just philosophically. In that podcast, Anna shares time management tips, productivity strategies, and really real life advice to help her listeners make the most of their time. In addition to teaching actionable takeaways, Anna interviews other go-getters to find out how they navigate family, friends, fulfilling careers, and full schedules. It's a great podcast. In this interview for today, for this week, like I said, we're going to start with the big picture, and Anna's going to describe sort of how do we start to have a philosophy shift about how we manage our time and where we need to start with that when we want to reset things, about the values and the vision around how we are spending our days, because our days make up our weeks, our months, and our years, right? So I'm really excited to share this interview with you. I hope you will get as much out of it as I did. And I hope you will come back next week to join me for part 2 of this really fabulous conversation. Without further ado, Anna Dearmon Kornick. All right, Anna, I'm so happy to have you here on the Heartful Parent Podcast. As I said in the intro, we both spoke at the same summit, and I love that you are here to talk about time management because I'm going to own it. It's not a strength of mine. I mean, I get stuff done, but I would like to get it done in less time. And so I'm really excited to dive into this conversation.
Well, Christy, thank you so much for having me. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here. I am happy to nerd out about all things time management whenever you would like, because let's be honest, you're not the only one who struggles with time management from time to time. Even me, as the time management coach, I am continually learning and refining. And when you consider how our lives as parents are constantly evolving as our kids get older, the way we manage our time has to evolve too. So it's definitely not a set it and forget it kind of thing.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. And I'm seeing that right now because my older daughter just started high school. And, that has shifted the whole family schedule. And of course, I'm trying to help her learn time management too. Which is, a challenge in and of itself, especially when it's something that I sometimes struggle with myself. So I'm really, really thrilled to dive into this. Before I dig into the meat of this, let's start with how in the world does someone become a time management coach? Like, what got you interested in helping other people manage their time?
Well, I didn't exactly decide to be a time management coach when I was in kindergarten on career day. Let's be honest. It's definitely something that I never would have expected. And I think that most people who knew me earlier in my professional career probably wouldn't have expected it either. So first of all, I need you to know that I was not born some kind of magical time management unicorn who just was innately good at time management. I was actually the late person among my friends for many years, to the point that they would give me an earlier time to arrive at brunch in order to actually get there on time. I had friends who loved me, sit me down and give me a stern talking to about how my lateness impacted more people than just me. I loved them for doing that. And then there was actually a season when I worked full time where I was late 17 times in a single quarter and was written up by my supervisor as a result. Can we say,
oh my goodness,
can we say mortifying? And so I begin my journey to time management being crystal clear that this is something that has been learned. And if I can learn it, anyone can learn it. But I actually started my career on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. My first job out of college, I was the scheduler to a United States congressman. So it was my job to plan his day from the moment he woke up until he ended the day. Every single minute was accounted for. And again, this is me fresh out of college, trying to navigate time management as a new professional who's not in college anymore. When you're in college, there's so much structure. You go to class at this time, you have this assignment that's due. But when you're out in the professional world, those boundaries and guidelines just aren't there for you. And you have to become so much more self-motivated and structured. And so I'm trying to figure out time management on my own while managing his super hectic schedule, someone who had to be everywhere at once. Literally, my first week on the job, I forgot to put enough time in the schedule for him to take bathroom breaks. So that was a really a really important lesson to learn, because then we had to shift meetings and just completely rearrange. Oh, it was wild. But I'm originally from Louisiana. My whole family lives in Louisiana. Right now, I live outside of New Orleans. I grew up in North Louisiana in a small town. And if there's one thing that you need to know about Louisiana, it's that our food is second to none. And you just can't get good Louisiana style food anywhere else but here. I had to spend an entire crawfish season, an entire boiled crawfish season, which is my favorite food, in Washington, D.C., where you cannot get boiled crawfish, not to mention, sure, some restaurant might serve seafood gumbo, but it's not going to be like my grandmother makes it. And so I hopped on a plane and I moved back home. I wanted to be closer to my family. I wanted to be closer to so many of my friends. Moved back home to Louisiana, where I kicked off a 10-year career in the 24/7 world of crisis communications and government affairs.
My God. That sounds like it's stressful. I mean, obviously managing down to the minute, like bathroom breaks for a congressman sounds stressful, but then crisis management.
Right. And, before we hit record, you and I, we were talking about earthquakes and we were talking about hurricanes and fires. Every single day of my job was some type of disaster, literally managing communications through hurricanes, through the BP oil spill was something that I worked on in one of my roles. Contaminated seafood. We already said hurricanes, but also earthquakes and tornadoes. I've worked on droughts and floods, so I've seen both sides.
Wow.
And then crazy things like vandalism of university property and nonprofit embezzlement schemes. That was wacko. Restaurants with nude swimming pools, just the craziest stuff you can imagine was a regular part of my everyday life. I mean, I have literally escorted CEOs down a freight elevator and into a back alley so that he could sneak out of a building in order to avoid TV cameras that were waiting outside at the front door. So that was a part of my life. Every single day was some kind of chaos that had to be brought to order. It was order out of chaos. And I was good at it. I loved it. I brought a lot of my early career on Capitol Hill of creating order out of that chaos into this role. But as you can imagine, being there for these clients during their darkest hours, when their reputation is on the line, their business, the future of their business is on the line, it can take a toll on you.
Oh my, no doubt. So I spent the first 20 years of my career as a criminal prosecutor. So, right. So that different kind of chaos, different kind of stress, different kind of crisis. I shouldn't say chaos, crisis, right? People were definitely in crisis.
Yeah.
But some of what you're describing even has me going, oh my goodness, like that is something else to be managing on a daily basis.
It was a lot. And it really started to impact my life, as you can imagine. Having to be in constant response, reactive mode. And one day I looked up and I realized that my boundaries were completely non-existent. My health was deteriorating because I wasn't getting enough sleep. I wasn't taking enough time for myself. My relationships were crumbling because I had no extra time to be anywhere for anyone. I started missing really important milestone events like friends' baby showers and wedding events, missing my stepdad's 70th surprise birthday party where family from all over the country and friends had assembled because I had a mandatory work event and my job depended on it. It was attend this event or lose my job. That was a huge breaking point for me because I can't get a do-over on
No.
those life experiences. Like none of us can. We don't get another chance at those once in a lifetime moments. And I knew this, and I knew that this wasn't the life that I wanted. I mentioned my stepdad. I actually grew up in a funeral home family. My stepdad is a third generation funeral director, and I grew up surrounded by loss, where you think about what typical dinner conversation is like at most families. Parents talk a little bit about work, you talk about your day. Well, our dinner time conversation was about who we had recently lost in our community, who had lost a parent, who had lost someone from church who had passed away. And so, I grew up with an up close and personal reminder that life is precious. And here I had let my own life get to the point that I wasn't living the life that I knew I should be. And so I walked away from that fancy sounding job with a cool title to get my life back. And I did a lot of reading and searching and trying to figure out, where did all of this go wrong? How did I get here? How can I get myself out of this and somehow help other people learn from all the mistakes that I've made? So I dove into every single time management, productivity, goal setting, vision casting book I could get my hands on. And then I discovered personality assessments, and I became a certified coach. And after making, a lot of mistakes, a lot of trial and error, now here I am. I am a time management coach. And every single day I get to help busy professionals and business owners stop feeling overwhelmed so that they can spend time on what matters most.
I love that story. I mean, it mirrors my own in so many ways, both because of the sort of the crisis work, although, at least in the criminal justice system, that's generally, we kind of follow a set of rules. So, when the stress is going to come, as opposed to what you were dealing with, which sounds like you never knew it was going to hit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit more structure at any rate, but I also left it to kind of get my life back and to reset my priorities. It's really interesting because, as I shared with you before we hit record, I spent about 5 weeks traveling this summer. So grateful to be able to do that, to take 5 weeks off, away from my business. Really lucky to have some folks that help with my business, hold down the fort for me. But we were in Europe and really noticed a difference in the way that and I shouldn't, lump them all together. We were in Italy and we were in Scotland. And at least in both of those locations, time and productivity were treated very differently than they are here in the US. And, we would try to go to a restaurant and we'd see that the owners of the restaurant were on holiday and they just shut it down for however many weeks they wanted to shut it down for. Or we would want, there'd be a little shop that we wanted to go into and we'd see in the afternoon that the owners were taking a few hours off in the afternoon to go, take a nap or do whatever.
I love that.
I loved it too. And I came back from that sort of with this realization that even though I've created my own business and my own life, my time has gotten a little bit away from me. And as we head into the school year, I'd really like to reset that a bit. And I know from speaking with friends and clients and just kind of taking the pulse on my own community, folks listening to the podcast, that I'm not the only one that uses this kind of fall time as a reset. Maybe they didn't have a trip that drove that home, but there's this realization, I think, for many of us that, life is just flying by.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to dive into some of the techniques that you talk about in your book that was just released, which I know we'll get to, but let's start here with that sort of in mind, that, many of us are looking for a reset, that this sort of constant drive to do more, which has us missing things, as you described. Where do we start? Or maybe even before that, we need to recognize what are the biggest mistakes that we're all making when it comes to our time. Like, where are we going wrong?
Well, it's so great because where do we start? And what are the biggest mistakes that we're making actually really go hand in hand, because the biggest mistake that we make when we try to fix the way that we feel about work-life balance or recalibrate our routines or fix our time management, the biggest mistake is that we start in the wrong place. Sometimes my clients or people that I talk with, they get so frustrated because they want to go straight to their calendar. They say, okay, let me open my calendar. Let me show you what it looks like. And let's help me figure out how to fit it all in, or help me figure out how to rearrange this so I can enjoy my life. And that's the wrong place to start. Time management does not start. Good time management does not start on the pages of our planners or on our digital calendars. It starts by getting to the heart of what matters most, by getting crystal clear about what your vision is, what you want your life to look like, and what's most important to you. Now, the heart of what matters most, that you could look at this as your purpose. In the book, Time Management Essentials, I talk a lot about starting with your purpose, starting with why, as a lot of people say.
Yeah.
And I consider that to be your vision for the future and your core values. And starting with vision, really putting into words, articulating, well, what is it that you want your life to look like? Because if you just rearrange what's currently on your calendar, or you try to see where you can fit it all in, you're not necessarily intentionally crafting the life that you want for yourself. And that's what time management is all about. Time management is life management. Time management is using time to design and create the life that you want for yourself. And so if you want to have that effective fresh start feeling in the fall that so many of us aim for, we've just wrapped up a summer with very little structure, or the structure kind of goes out the window. So once our kids have that consistent drop-off time, pickup time, activities, we thrive in that structure too. Everybody knows, all the literature says that toddlers and babies thrive on routines.
Yep.
Right? No question. Well, hello, we are just grown-up toddlers.
Yes.
Right? I mean,
some of us more than others.
Exactly. And so we're the same way. So when that built-in structure comes into play with our kids, it just feels like, okay, yes, now this is the time to reset. Yeah. And that reset is not going to be fruitful unless you actually stop and think, okay, what do I want my weeks to look like? What do I want my weeks to feel like? What's most important to me? And how can I make sure that I have time in my week for those things first?
And I have to tell you, this is resonating so strongly with me, because when I coach parents, and we don't deal a lot with time, I do make sure they're putting self-care on the list, but we talk about values and vision and the importance of those two things. And I have exercises inside the Heartful Parent Academy about values and vision, and what do you want your life as a parent to look like? What do you want your relationship with your children to look like? Your relationship with your partner, if you are parenting with a partner.
Yeah.
And so that makes so much sense to me as the place that we have to also start with time. And yet, full confession, my inclination, like many of your clients, is to say, okay, here's my calendar. Tell me how to make it work.
Right. No, it's not
right.
Not
doesn't
yet.
make sense. Yeah.
Not yet. It's kind of like wanting to organize your closet. Like, oh, I need to organize my closet. And instead of actually thinking about, okay, well, what do I want to wear? How do I want to feel? What clothes do I need to have in order to support the life that I want? It's just going in and moving things around. What does that accomplish? Not much.
Yep. Oh, so true. As someone who currently has on my list of things to do, I don't even call it organize my closet. I need to get some stuff out of there. I need to edit it out.
Yep. Edit.
Yep. Okay. So edit is something we probably need to do with our time as well, right? Figuring out what, as you said, what do we want to actually be spending our days doing?
Yeah. I really like to start with a blank slate, to just suspend reality for a moment and turn to a fresh page in a planner, maybe even just an old planner that you're not even using anymore, just so you can mark it up and get it messy, or to even create a new blank calendar in Google Calendar. Call it, my ideal week. And because when you start with a blank slate, instead of taking into account all of the things that are already in your week, all of the existing things, you're not giving yourself an opportunity to really decide what to say yes and no to. Because you already have these things that are populating your calendar. So suspend reality, start with a blank slate, and then start with your priorities. And priority can be such a loaded word. I'm sure there are people listening right now who are like, but Anna, everything's a priority. Every single thing on my list is a priority. And I'm sure that it is. I'm sure that every single thing on your list has some level of importance. But the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, tells us that 20% of our inputs are going to result in 80% of our outputs. That means that 20% of the ways that we spend our time are going to give us 80% of the joy or the pleasure that we have. Or if you think about your clients, 20% of your clients are going to result in 80% of your revenue, or just, it shows up all the time. Going back to our closets, I bet if I opened your closet, Christy, that you are probably wearing 20% of your clothes 80% of the time.
That's probably true. That is probably true.
It happens over and over again. But what that means for us is that even if you have a to-do list that is full of priorities with 17 things on it, 20% is going to give you the most bang for your buck. Some things are just going to be just have more weight to them.
Yeah.
And so I like to just eliminate priority as a single category and break it down into 3 different types. I like to think about priorities as boulders, big rocks, or pebbles, because we can picture a boulder. We know that boulders are giant, and if you push on them with all your might, they are not going to budge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big rocks, still big, still heavy, but we can move them around. And then pebbles are tiny. Pebbles, can slip through our fingers.
Right.
And so in our lives, if we take this idea of everything's a priority and then ask ourselves, what type of a priority is this? It gives us a lot more clarity about how to plan our day and how to plan this ideal week, this winning week.
Yeah.
And so boulders, these are the things in our lives that are important, but they're not urgent. And a lot of times when we hear that something is not urgent, we think that it's, that's not as important as something that is urgent. But examples of things that are important but not urgent are having a date night with your partner, having one-on-one time with your kids, taking care of yourself in whatever form self-care means for you, personal or professional development, cultivating relationships, taking care of your health, taking care of your well-being. None of those things are ever going to be on fire. And because they're not urgent, because they're not on fire, a lot of times we put them off. We say, I'll do that later. I'll schedule a date night once I get everything else that we need to do done. But what ends up happening is that there is no magical space that opens up that just screams, this time is perfect for a date night, because you're just going to keep on piling on the urgent things and being in reactive mode. Yes. And so those activities that are important, but they're not urgent, and they, like we said, they're not on fire, but the more we neglect them, the more likely they are then to catch on fire. Because what happens when you consistently neglect your relationships, when you consistently neglect your self-care, your mental health, your relationships with your kids, what happens?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Like, those are things, as I'm thinking about clients that I've worked with, they come to me because those things are suddenly on fire.
Yes.
Oh, my partner and I are not seeing eye to eye, or we're not parenting well together. We're not even like living well together, or things have blown up with my kid, or I'm having a health crisis.
Yeah.
Right.
And so this is exactly why that when it comes to planning our weeks, we have to put those boulders in first. We have to, and I don't mean they have to be the first thing in your day, but you have to hold space for them before you allow everything else that's reactive to flow in. And it's hard. It is hard to be proactive, because every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something else.
That is one of my all-time favorite sayings. I heard that for the first time a number of years ago, and it was such a seismic shift for me in learning to say no, because it reminded me that if I say yes to the PTA or to the work project or to the whatever, I might just be saying no to my kids, my husband, myself, like things that actually matter more to me.
Exactly.
I say that to my clients. What are you actually saying no to here? Yeah. Yes. Love that you said that.
And so we start with those boulders and we put those into our week. And then our next stop is our big rocks. Now, big rocks this is what takes up a lot of our time if we are just living kind of day to day and in reactive mode, because it's easier to put out whatever fire is in front of you and then move on to the next one and then move on to the next one. And you tell yourself, okay, once I take care of everything that needs to be done, then I'll be proactive. But the problem is that our to-do lists are not finite. Our to-do lists are a conveyor belt, and there is constantly more. Newsflash, my friend, no one here is ever going to get to the end of their full life to-do list. It's just not going to happen. Like we're not.
As somebody who loves lists and loves crossing things off lists, that just makes me crazy.
Yeah, I know. It does. But the sooner that you can recognize that you are never going to finish every single thing that needs to be done, because Harry Potter, is it the very first one when they're at this bank and they're going to get something, and every time a cup touches another cup, they like multiply. And so before you know it, the entire room is like full of all of these like gold cups. That's what happens with our to-dos. We do one and then they turn into two more.
Yep.
So that's a huge mindset shift. And that's also why it's important to make a realistic to-do list for the day. I like to have a to-do list and a today list. What are just the things that I'm going to realistically accomplish today? Because that you can cross everything off.
Yes.
It's having that limit. So anyway, our big rocks are those things that are important and they're urgent. And they're typically project-based. They are the things that move the needle in your life and in your work. So again, project-based work. What we're doing right now, having this podcast interview, this is a big rock because this moves the needle. In our home life, something like planning a kid's birthday party or planning a vacation, something that typically has an end goal. It's not necessarily like an ongoing thing, but it's project-based and it moves the needle in some way. Okay. Renovating the hall bathroom, something like that.
Right. Okay. Love it.
We've got our boulders in first, then we drop in our big rocks. But then what about all of the other little bitty things that we need to do, like making a dentist appointment and scheduling the dog to get groomed and making sure that we have the AC serviced or the furnace serviced before the change in seasons and buying back to school stuff. We have all of these little bitty things that we still have to do on a regular basis. And these are our pebbles. And the thing about pebbles is that they could very easily take over our entire day, our entire life, if we don't watch out. Because they're small, because they're usually pretty easy and low impact, our brain loves them. Our brain loves pebbles because they give us a quick win and a dopamine hit. And I'm going to check this off my list and draw a line through it and feel awesome. But we're not actually moving the needle. We're just getting little things done. And so one of the biggest mistakes that we tend to make is that we start our days and we look at our to-do list and this looks hard. So I'm not going to do that yet. But look, here's 10 easy things. I'm going to do these 10 easy things.
I'm so guilty of this. I am so guilty of this. And then I end up the night before going, oh God, the big project isn't done.
Yes. Yeah. That's what happens. That's how pebbles take over, because we can lose control, spend a whole day playing with pebbles without actually knocking out those big rocks. And so the great thing about pebbles, though, is that they fit into the cracks of our days. You've got 15 minutes between two meetings. Use that to make your dentist appointment. You've got 30 minutes here or there. Use those to tackle a few pebbles that are on your list. One of my favorite recommendations whenever you're just beginning to transition your thought from everything's a priority to, oh, there are different types of priorities, is to, if you write out your to-do list, write a P, a little lowercase p next to every single pebble on your list. Write a BR, next to every single big rock on your list. And then write an uppercase B next to your boulders. You'll probably see the 80-20 rule shake out here, and you'll probably have 80% of your list is going to be made up of pebbles.
Yep. Oh, I'm totally going to do that.
Yeah, do it.
Because I'm surrounded right now by lists, both on my computer and on scraps of paper.
And it's awesome because it trains your brain to begin thinking, wait, is this a big rock or is this a pebble? How do I need to treat this?
Yeah. I love this because it gives a visual, right? For those of us who like to have a visual for how to sort of think about our lists and our lives. So you've said that we start with the values and the vision. What do we want to fill our days with? What would our ideal day look like? And then we look at what are those boulders that we need to put in? What are the big rocks that are coming up for us? And then how do we fit in the pebbles? And we probably, frankly, can't or won't ever fit in all the pebbles. All right, we're going to stop there, listeners. We are going to stop there, and I'm going to bring you the rest of the interview next week, as I already told you, because I want to give you time to kind of process this idea of, starting with values and vision, and then really thinking through for your own life, what are your boulders? What are your big rocks? And what are your pebbles? And how might you start to shift those in your schedule? Next week, Anna is going to share even more, like really sort of in the moment, on the day, nitty-gritty strategies of where we fit those boulders, big rocks, and pebbles in, and how we can make that more manageable. I'm really excited to share the second part of the interview with you. It was not originally my plan to break this into two, but it needed to be broken into two because this is such good stuff. So take this week's information, think about it, maybe make some notes, write stuff down, contemplate sort of where you want to go with that or what your ideas are. And then join me again next week on the Heartful Parent Podcast, where we will dig in even deeper to how to get those boulders, big rocks, and pebbles situated in a meaningful way that really helps you show up and live your best life as a parent, as a partner, and as a professional. I'll see you then.